So since GenAI is the hot new buzzword, I thought I'd do a quick explainer video on what it is and how it works. Now, this is not meant to be a deep dive on the technology itself, but rather a historical perspective of how the industry moved from structured analytics like databases to unstructured analytics like social media, blogs, and documents. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the lounge.
Today, generative AI is being used to create all kinds of stuff like images, music, and probably a bunch of other things that I haven't even heard yet. But today's focus is on what I call text-based generative AI. So let's start with a couple examples. One of the most common examples is the use of GenAI to enable chatbots and virtual assistants to respond back to questions. So those responses are generated automatically based on a model that was trained on real-world conversations. That's why they can sound so human-like. They are imitating human interactions. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there that don't like that word imitating, but that's where most experts believe that we are at this point with GenAI. It has the mental capacity of a parrot that doesn't really know how to speak itself. It's just mimicking things that it's heard before. Now, that's not to say that's not still amazing. I mean, have you ever seen anybody's parrot that they train to say, "I love you"?
I love you.
The fact is, this technology is moving super fast, and I have no doubts it'll be capable of simulated thought before we know it, and that's what has a lot of people, including myself, a little bit concerned. Another great use case is text translation. When it comes to translation, context is key. Services like Google Translate can take a word like bank and translate it into any language with just a click. Now, I bet most of you, when I said the word bank, pictured a financial institution. But look what happens when I just add one more word of context to the same algorithm. So if we type in bank shot, look what Google thinks we're talking about. Or if I type in the word river bank, we get a completely different set of images. So this tells you how important context is, which we'll talk about here in a little bit more. Last and certainly not least is text summarization. The reason I saved this one for last is that it most closely resembles the beginnings of GenAI, which is called natural language processing, or NLP. To understand how GenAI works, specifically on text, you need to understand how NLP works. Unstructured data like tweets, comments, and speech to text doesn't fit neatly into a traditional row and column structure of a relational database. And oddly enough, this is originally where the term big data came from. It was never a reference of how many terabytes or petabytes of data you had, but the amount of different columns and rows it would take to classify each individual word in a single paragraph or sentence of text. The beginnings of NLP was based on an approach called bag of words, where each occurrence of a word is counted in a document or a group of documents called a corpus. So think of a corpus as a folder or a directory where all the documents that you're going to train the model on are stored. This is an important concept of how GenAI is related to NLP, so keep this in mind. However, the bag of words method has a few drawbacks. First of all, root words or variation of a word can get counted separately. So let's use our bank example earlier. We can say, I went to the bank, I'm going banking. Those are basically the same words, but they would get counted as two separate instances. Bag of words also includes a lot of noise, which we call stop words like and, the, or, that don't add any value to the model. That's why the current generation of NLP tools can recognize partial phrases, intent, and even generate topics and base the sentiment of the conversation. So you may be asking, what does all this have to do with GenAI? Well, GenAI uses a specialized model based on natural language processing to understand and interpret unstructured data. Rather than training the model on your own personal collection of documents, GenAI is trained on publicly available information on the internet called a large language model. Now, there are both open source and proprietary large language models that have varying degrees of accuracy. But in general, the more data you feed a model, the more accurate it becomes. However, just training the model is only part of the power of GenAI. Just like in NLP, the ability to add context is how chatbots like ChatGPT can interpret a question like, who were the last 5 teams to win the Super Bowl? And then give you back a human-like response like the example here. The reason its ability to do that is because it was trained to mimic human conversation. So where do I see this technology going in the future? As I mentioned earlier, it's moving so fast that it's hard to predict where this technology will be in even 12 months. I would say that security and the ability to add your own data with publicly available data will be a huge area of interest. I also think that transparency in the sources used to generate the responses and the ability to validate those responses will be vital. The one common thing I've seen with all new technology is just as fast as the creators can roll it out, hackers find a way to exploit it. One of the ways that I could see somebody trying to exploit GenAI large language models is by feeding it large amounts of false or misleading data into these models. Today, most models aren't sophisticated enough to distinguish a true statement from a false statement. I think that'll be key for people to actually trust the results they're getting from these GenAI models. Well, hopefully you found some of this information helpful, and the next time somebody brings up GenAI in a casual conversation, you get to wow them with all your knowledge about large language models, natural language processing, and big data. So thanks for watching.